What makes a city an unshakable symbol of resilience? Stalingrad wasn't just a battle, it was the turning point where humanity faced its darkest hour and refused to fall. Nestled along the banks of the mighty Volga River, Stalingrad, modern-day Volgograd in Russia, became the heart of one of the most decisive battles in human history. From July 17, 1942 to February 2, 1943, this once thriving industrial hub turned into a war-torn wasteland, the stage for a brutal fight that spanned over 6 months. To understand why Stalingrad was chosen as the ultimate battlefield, we must journey back to the summer of 1941. Hitler's Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion ever undertaken, had sent German forces storming into Soviet territory with staggering momentum. By the following year, the German war machine turned its eyes to Stalingrad, a city critical for 2 reasons: its strategic position as a gateway to the Volga River and its proximity to the oil-rich Caucasus, a resource Hitler desperately needed to fuel his war. But this wasn't merely a tactical decision. For Adolf Hitler, Stalingrad represented far more than a military target. It was a chance to break the Soviet spirit. For Joseph Stalin, it was a battle for survival itself. The name Stalingrad carried immense weight. For Hitler, capturing the city would deal a devastating psychological blow to the Soviets, proving to the world that even the city bearing Stalin's name was no match for the German Reich. For Stalin, losing it was not an option. It would mean conceding to humiliation and potentially destabilizing the Soviet Union from within. The battle was no longer just a clash of armies. It had evolved into a battle of ideologies, egos, and national pride. Both sides poured every ounce of their resources and determination into claiming victory, setting the stage for one of history's most catastrophic conflicts. But how do you defend a city when every brick is under siege? The answer lay in a desperate gamble, where sacrifice became a weapon, and survival itself was the ultimate victory. In the brutal chess game of war, Stalingrad was the board, and every street, building, and corner became a piece in a deadly struggle between 2 relentless forces. But who had the better strategy, and at what cost? Adolf Hitler's obsession with Stalingrad dictated the German strategy. The primary objective was clear: seize control of the Volga River, sever Soviet supply lines, and destroy the Red Army's fighting capacity in one decisive blow. Stalingrad was to be a stepping stone toward dominating the oil fields of the Caucasus, fueling the Nazi war machine for years to come. To the German Sixth Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, was tasked with capturing the city. Backed by the Luftwaffe, they unleashed devastating aerial bombardments, reducing much of Stalingrad to rubble before the ground assault even began. But Hitler's confidence was his greatest weakness. He underestimated not just the Soviet resistance, but the unforgiving Russian winter, which would soon turn his offensive into a frozen nightmare. The Germans relied heavily on their blitzkrieg tactics, which had proven effective in previous campaigns. However, the urban terrain of Stalingrad rendered these rapid, armored maneuvers almost useless. The rubble-strewn city turned into a labyrinth, forcing German soldiers to fight in grueling close-quarters combat. On the Soviet side, Joseph Stalin issued a simple yet chilling directive: not a step back. The infamous Order No. 227 demanded that every inch of ground be defended, even at the cost of soldiers' lives. Retreat was considered treason, and blocking units were positioned to shoot any soldier who attempted to flee. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, brilliant strategist, spearheaded the Soviet defense. Recognizing the German reliance on rapid offensives, he and other Soviet generals devised a plan to draw the Germans into a prolonged battle of attrition. The Soviets knew they couldn't match the Germans in firepower or technology, so they relied on sheer manpower and unwavering determination. Zhukov had a secret weapon tie. He knew that every day the Germans spent in Stalingrad brought them closer to exhaustion. Surrounded by an unforgiving winter and a relentless enemy, the heart of the Battle of Stalingrad was fought in the ruins of the city itself. What the Germans thought would be a quick victory turned into a nightmare. The Soviets turned every building, every basement, and every street corner into a fortress. Factories became bunkers, sewers turned into ambush points, and sniper nests were hidden in the rubble. One of the most iconic elements of the battle was the Soviet sniper movement, epitomized by Vasily Zaitsev, whose sharpshooting skills demoralized German troops. Imagine fighting in a city where the enemy could be lurking behind any shadow, beneath every floorboard, or above every rooftop. This was Stalingrad War, reduced to its rawest, most brutal form. the Soviets implemented a strategy known as hugging the enemy. By keeping their lines as close as possible to the Germans, they neutralized the effectiveness of German artillery and airstrikes, forcing the enemy into relentless close combat scenarios. But as the Germans pushed deeper into the city, they unknowingly stepped into a trap that would change the course of the war and history itself. Every great battle has its turning points, moments where the tide shifts, where hope is lost or rekindled. At Stalingrad, these moments defined not just the city's fate, but the destiny of a world at war. In the summer of 1942, as the German Sixth Army pushed towards Stalingrad, the city found itself under siege. The Germans unleashed a relentless bombing campaign that reduced much of Stalingrad to rubble. The Luftwaffe dropped thousands of tons of explosives, creating a hellish landscape of destruction and smoke. Yet, the very ruins the Germans created became their greatest challenge, providing cover for Soviet defenders in a brutal urban battlefield. For the civilians trapped inside Stalingrad, survival became a daily struggle. Food and water were scarce, and the harsh Russian winter only added to their misery. The entire families lived in basements or the shells of destroyed buildings, exposed to constant shelling and gunfire. Imagine the terror of living in a city where death loomed at every corner, sniper's bullet, an airstrike, or even starvation. For the people of Stalingrad, survival itself was an act of defiance. Soviet soldiers fought valiantly to hold the city, engaging the enemy in what became known as Rattenkrieg Rat War. This was close-quarters combat at its most savage, with soldiers battling for control of individual rooms and floors within buildings. By November 1942, the German Sixth Army had dug deep into Stalingrad, overconfident in their ability to crush the Soviet resistance. But Marshal Georgy Zhukov and the Soviet High Command had been quietly planning a counteroffensive that would change the course of the battle and the war. Codenamed Operation Uranus, the plan was as bold as it was risky. The Soviets aimed to encircle the German forces by launching a massive pincer movement. Their target, the weaker flanks of the German Sixth Army, which were defended by under-equipped Romanian and Italian troops. While the Germans focused on breaking Stalingrad, the Soviets aimed for something far greater, trapping the entire Sixth Army in a deadly noose. On November 19, 1942, the operation began with a thunderous artillery barrage, followed by waves of Soviet tanks and infantry. The Romanians, overwhelmed and outgunned, crumbled under the assault. Within days, the two Soviet pincers met at the town of Kalak, west of Stalingrad, effectively encircling over 300,000 German soldiers. As the Soviet forces tightened their grip, the German Sixth Army found itself trapped in a frozen wasteland with dwindling supplies. Hitler, refusing to allow a retreat, ordered General Friedrich Paulus to hold his position at all costs, promising that relief was on its way. The Luftwaffe attempted to airlift supplies to the encircled troops, but the effort was woefully inadequate. Soldiers froze to death in their foxholes, fought over scraps of food, and succumbed to disease. The once mighty Sixth Army was reduced to a desperate, starving force. Imagine being a soldier in Stalingrad, surrounded, freezing, and starving. Every day a fight for survival, every night haunted by the cries of the wounded. And yet, the order was clear: fight to the last man. By January 1943, the situation for the Germans was hopeless. The Soviets continued their relentless assault, closing in on the city from all sides. On January 31st, Friedrich Paulus, promoted to Field Marshal by Hitler in a last-ditch effort to inspire resistance, surrendered to the Soviets. This was unprecedented. No German Field Marshal had ever been captured alive. Hitler was enraged, viewing Paulus' surrender as an unforgivable betrayal. The surrender marked the end of the Battle of Stalingrad, but its impact resonated far beyond the battlefield. Over 91,000 German soldiers were taken prisoner, though only a fraction would survive the harsh conditions of Soviet captivity. Paulus' surrender wasn't just the fall of the Sixth Army, it was the collapse of Hitler's dream of domination, the beginning of the end for the Nazi war machine. Few battles in history have reshaped the destiny of nations as profoundly as Stalingrad. What came after wasn't just the end of a conflict, it was the dawn of a new world order. The Battle of Stalingrad was more than just a victory for the Soviet Union. It was a decisive turning point in World War II. For the first time, the seemingly unstoppable German Wehrmacht suffered a catastrophic defeat. The loss of the Sixth Army, one of Germany's most elite units, shattered the illusion of Nazi invincibility. The battle marked the beginning of the German retreat on the Eastern Front. Following Stalingrad, Soviet forces launched a series of offensives that steadily pushed the Germans back toward Berlin. It also disrupted Hitler's broader strategy, forcing him to divert critical resources from other fronts. Stalingrad didn't just halt the German advance, it flipped the balance of power, turning the tide of the war in favor of the Allies. Stalingrad wasn't just a battle, it was a human catastrophe on an unimaginable scale. Over 2 million people, soldiers and civilians, lost their lives in a brutal 6-month struggle. For the German soldiers, many died in the bitter cold or from starvation. Those who survived the battle faced grim prospects as prisoners of war. Of the 91,000 German troops captured, fewer than 6,000 would ever return home, many succumbing to disease, exhaustion, or the harsh conditions of Soviet labor camps. For Soviet civilians and soldiers, the toll was equally harrowing. Entire neighborhoods were leveled, families were torn apart, and the city itself was left in ruins. Stalingrad became a graveyard of dreams, where the cost of survival was measured in unimaginable suffering. Behind the headlines of victory lay a city of ashes, a battlefield where humanity's capacity for endurance was tested to its very limits. The victory at Stalingrad wasn't just a military triumph, it was a political watershed moment for the Soviet Union. Stalin's leadership, though marked by brutality, gained global recognition as the Red Army proved its ability to challenge and defeat the Nazi war machine. The battle also solidified the Soviet Union's position as a dominant force in the Allied coalition. By the war's end, the USSR would emerge as a global superpower, its influence extending across Eastern Europe and beyond. From the rubble of Stalingrad, the Soviet Union rose as a superpower, its shadow stretching far beyond the battlefields of World War II. The Battle of Stalingrad is more than a chapter in history. It's a symbol of resilience, sacrifice, and the high cost of war. For generations, its lessons have resonated, reminding us of the strength and fragility of the human spirit. Stalingrad was more than a battle, it was a message to the world that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure, resist, and triumph. In the midst of destruction, some find the strength to survive, while others find the courage to fight for something greater. Stalingrad was not just the stage for a colossal military battle. For those caught in the middle of it, it became a place where survival turned into a daily struggle, and stories of human resilience became legendary. Imagine a young Soviet soldier, Aleksandr Ivanov, who entered the battle at just 19 years old, holding an outdated rifle in his hands and uncertain whether he'd make it through the day. He never forgot the sound of the bombings, a deadly symphony that tore through the air as he took cover in the ruins of the city, waiting for the right moment to move. When the bombs fell, all I could ask myself was, "Will I die today?" he said decades later, recalling his experience. These stories didn't just come from soldiers, they came from civilians who were trapped in the streets turned battlefield. Nadezhda Petrovna, a woman just 28 years old, watched her city transform into a war zone. She and her young daughter sheltered in the basement of a partially destroyed building, surviving on minimal rations and the constant threat of death. "I didn't know if what kept me alive was hunger or the desire for my daughter to have a future," she recalled. Her story, like so many others, highlights the silent bravery of ordinary people facing the unthinkable. These stories, many ignored or forgotten for decades, stand as testimonies to the human spirit in the face of chaos. They show that, behind every tactic and strategy, were real lives, forged in adversity and suffering. While history often overlooks their courage, the women of Stalingrad played a pivotal role, not only as survivors, but as fierce defenders of their city. In the heart of Stalingrad, where the battle raged with relentless fury, women stood side by side with men, not just as passive observers of history, but as active participants in the war effort. Some fought in the trenches, others as snipers, while many took on the crucial role of defending their homes and families against the invading forces. One of the most iconic figures among these women was Lyudmila Pavlichenko, a Soviet sniper credited with 309 confirmed kills. Her story became legendary as she struck fear into the German soldiers, who had not expected to face such deadly opposition from women. Pavlichenko's sharp eye and unflinching resolve earned her a place in the history books. But for her, it was about survival, surviving for her country, for her comrades, and for the future. But it wasn't just women like Pavlichenko who made history. Thousands of others, including nurses, factory workers, and civilians were integral to the defense of Stalingrad. Alina Kolesnikova, a nurse, spent days treating the wounded in makeshift hospitals, often under the constant threat of air raids and shell fire. "I had to keep going," she said. "I couldn't let them down. I wasn't just a nurse, I was a part of something much bigger." In the shadows of the battle, Soviet women showed resilience and bravery, becoming the backbone of Stalingrad's defense. Their stories, often overshadowed by their male counterparts, are a testament to the vital role women played in one of the most crucial battles of World War II. Behind every sniper's rifle, every bandage, and every resistance movement, there were women fighting, not just for survival, but for victory. Stalingrad was not just a turning point in World War II, it was a masterclass in military strategy, leadership, and the unbreakable will to resist. The Battle of Stalingrad, though a brutal and costly conflict, left behind invaluable lessons that continue to shape modern warfare and leadership strategies. What transpired within those city ruins wasn't merely a clash of armies. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of strategic thinking, and the cost of underestimating your enemy. One of the key lessons learned was the importance of adaptability in strategy. The German Sixth Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, fell into the trap of overconfidence and a lack of flexibility. Their initial plan was to seize Stalingrad quickly, believing that the Soviet forces would collapse under pressure. But the Germans failed to account for the Soviet ability to adapt, regroup, and counterattack. When the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, they exploited the weak flanks of the German army, effectively encircling them and shifting the course of the battle. The ability to change tactics mid-fight is a principle that has since been crucial in military strategy. Leadership, too, was a defining factor in Stalingrad. Soviet commanders, led by General Vasily Chukov and the famed Marshal Zhukov, demonstrated an unwavering commitment to their soldiers and the defense of the city. Despite overwhelming odds, they kept morale high and continually pressed the advantage. In contrast, the German leadership, isolated and stretched thin, failed to adapt quickly to the changing conditions. General Paulus, though a capable officer, was ultimately caught in a web of logistical issues and directives from the high command, leading to a breakdown in effective leadership. Finally, Stalingrad underscores the power of resistance. The Soviet defenders, despite being outnumbered and facing horrific conditions, refused to give in. The battle became symbolic of the broader Soviet resistance to the Nazi invasion, an enduring spirit that would shape the rest of the war. The lesson here is simple. No matter how dire the situation, the will to resist can alter the course of history. Stalingrad, in all its horror and heroism, offers insights not just for military professionals, but for anyone in positions of leadership. It teaches that success is built on the ability to adapt, to lead with courage in the face of adversity, and to never underestimate the power of human will. In the brutal urban warfare of Stalingrad, it wasn't just the strength of armies that decided the outcome, it was the deadly efficiency of the weapons and technology deployed on both sides. The Battle of Stalingrad, one of history's most intense confrontations, was shaped not only by the courage of its soldiers, but also by the cutting-edge technology deployed. Advanced weaponry and ingenious tactics played pivotal roles in this deadly conflict. The Soviet T-34 tank, renowned for its speed, firepower, and durability in harsh conditions, became a symbol of Soviet resistance, surprising and overwhelming German forces. Meanwhile, the Wehrmacht relied on their panzer tanks, the devastating 88mm gun, and anti-tank weapons like the Panzerfaust to challenge the Soviets. German Stuka dive bombers further intensified their assault, wreaking havoc in the early stages. Artillery dominated the urban warfare of Stalingrad, with the Soviets unleashing Katyusha rocket launchers to terrifying effect, while heavy bombardments from both sides leveled the city. In brutal close-quarters combat, flamethrowers, grenades, sniper rifles, and specialized tactics became essential tools of survival. Communication technology also played a critical role, allowing both sides to coordinate amidst the chaos. Though initially superior, German communication efforts faltered as Soviet forces adapted and encircled them. Ultimately, Stalingrad proved that victory hinged not just on technological superiority, but on the effective use of innovation in battle. These advancements shaped future conflicts and highlighted the profound impact of technology on modern warfare. After the Battle of Stalingrad, the city lay in ruins, its infrastructure obliterated, and its streets filled with remnants of war. Yet, amid the devastation, the Soviet Union embarked on an extraordinary journey of reconstruction, turning Stalingrad into a powerful symbol of resilience and determination. Rebuilding Stalingrad was more than a logistical task. It was a national priority and a statement of Soviet strength. Marshal Zhukov vowed the city would rise stone by stone, and workers, driven by pride and urgency, restored critical infrastructure like bridges and transportation along the Volga River. Despite scarce resources, they transformed the city into a modern industrial hub while memorializing the battle's sacrifices through monuments like the Mamayev-Kurgan Memorial Complex. The reconstruction of Stalingrad became a global emblem of Soviet perseverance and a testament to the unyielding spirit of its people. Today, as Volgograd, the city thrives, carrying the enduring legacy of its rise from the ashes and the power of renewal after unimaginable devastation. As we reflect on the monumental events of Stalingrad, we want to hear from you. What part of this story left the greatest impression on you? Was it the military strategies, the individual tales of survival, or the lasting cultural impact of the battle? What other battles or events from history would you like us to explore on the channel? If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others. Your support helps us continue bringing these important moments from history to life. And make sure to leave a comment with your thoughts or suggestions for future videos. We're looking forward to hearing from you.